for that type of snare, that's the EQ that works for the mix for this type of snare. The song is going to differ each snare, so you can't just take this and paste this to every snare, top and bottom, that you have, because it may not work. Okay, all right, here's my hat. Got a warm hi-hat mix on here. It's sat in the mix really well. Here's my tom mix. Now for my toms, I'm telling you, these drums were already great, so it doesn't take much. You have to start with good drums. But listen, let's activate it. See there? I took out a lot of characteristics. Started with a preset and tweaked it the way I like it. Let's bring in the rest of these toms. And let's bring in the virtual mix rack on all of them. So it didn't take much. Now these overheads, overhead type preset, so that that compression squeezes them overheads. Then took the low end out and accentuated 2K, because I wanted that snare to stick out in the overhead mic right here. This is the snare was lying right here, and I wanted that to be heard. So all together, with all the drums, this is what you have. So real clean. Now, in programming the bass line, Trillion was my go-to for this. Okay, Spectrasonics Trillion, probably one of the most amazing bass plugins ever. And I used the simplest patch, Patitucci 6-string finger. You don't have to use some elaborate, over gargantuan, super large plugin to make things sound real. You just have to know how to program the simple plugins and know what to put together to make it do what it's doing. Okay, so listen to what I did with this patch. Very simple. Now it sounds really good the way it is. It sounds amazing the way it is. Let me take the effects off. Okay, now I used Trillion again because Trillion has some slides, some bass slides. Okay, it has some actual bass slides in here. Okay, it has some bass slides, and I just programmed the slides on a second track alongside my bass track, so you get this sound right here. Let's listen. See, and you get that more realistic sound, and then when you put it in the mix, it sounds like a bass player is actually doing all that sliding. Okay, and Virtual Mix Rack saves me again, threw it together, fat bass preset, and then all I did was just make the tweaks where it's necessary. A lot of it came this way, so I didn't have to do much to it. I want to say, I added like the Earth plugin and different things like that to make it more beefy on the low end. Okay. For my keys, all right, I used the Electric 88 from Waves, I believe. Normally, people would be like, why didn't you use Keyscape? Why didn't you use, sometimes, certain plugins don't work for certain songs. And I just pulled this up just to see what it would feel like and sound like. And it sounded great. Okay. Virtual mix rack again. This is an EQ strip. So let's go to the organ. And I did quite a bit on this organ, but I'll let y'all hear it without the effects. All right, so for the organ, I'm using B5, okay, B5 version 2. And I tweaked this organ to my exact specifications. I went in and tweaked the speaker preferences and all of that stuff, because you can go in here and you can move these mics around, and you can on the horn and the rotor, you can move the mics around and do all that, change the spread and the distance and the EQ for each mic and the noise level, and you can really get it sounding exactly the way you need it to sound. And I do it different each song, because each song I want a different type of organ tone, or different room tone with the Leslie and all of that stuff. First thing I did was put red light distortion on here. That's the first thing I did. And let me show you what difference it makes. Okay, you get that tube amp driving sound that you hear from organs. Then, of course, I rolled off the low ends on my EQ, and then I compressed it. So you get this nice fat organ sound, man. And the crazy thing is, it sounds a little hollow. It sounds a little bit boxy, but when you put it in the mix of all of everything else that's happening, it like stands out on its own, and it adds an element and a churchiness to the gospel song or gospel vibe that you need. You don't need it to occupy space of thickness and highs and all of that, because you have so many other elements that are going into this, okay, that need to occupy that space. So let's show you what I use for my synths. Of course, so for all my synths, I used EQ, roll off the low end, accentuate the highs just a little bit, just boost the highs around 5K for that nice definition, and then I compressed it. Okay, I compressed it at a ratio of 3. I do like a 3.5 to 1 ratio, threshold at -18. Okay, I really want it to sound a little squeezed, not overly squeezed, but I want about 8 to 10 of gain reduction, because you want it to hit hard and you want that fatness that comes with those synths, because it's a lot of synth stuff happening. All right, so I used a saw synth from the JV1080. I actually made this synth, but it's just a saw synth from the JV1080. And then there's a synth called the Polyrock. JV1080 as well. It's called the Polyrock. Okay, Roland JV1080. Y'all get the Roland Cloud stuff. If you don't got it, I'm telling you, a lot of these sounds are in there. Okay. Now, with building these sounds, a lot of people go, well, what sounds do I use? Well, it's a preference thing. It's really a preference thing. And knowing what area of the frequency spectrum these sounds occupy. Okay. And a lot of these synths occupy somewhere around the same frequency range, but a lot of this is in, instead of you building this huge fat synth sound in my keyboard to play, I'd rather just track 4 or 5 synths put together doing the same thing somewhat, so that it's fat, but I get to control in the mix what's coming in and what's going out. Because sometimes the characteristics of each synth all at once, if you turn it down, then you turn down everything. Or if you pull a frequency out of a patch that's already concocted before you record it, well, you're pulling that frequency down on everything, but sometimes you want the frequency of another synth to still be there. So I stack my sounds, I stack simple sounds together instead of making this big old fat sound in my keyboard and then recorded it in there. So that's what you get. Okay, here's the Bright Brass. For those of you guys who are familiar with the Bright Brass patch, it is a motif patch, really. It's a motif patch. It's a motif patch, or should I say a Yamaha patch. Okay, this is the Yamaha Tyros 2 NorthSeaTrack.com. They have contact versions of a lot of keyboards, and so this is the Bright Brass, which is also called the Big and Bright on the Motif ES. Okay, that's all it is. Motif ES stuff. Big and Bright. Okay, used it raw, EQ and compression, same thing. I use the same thing on all of this. Like I said, I just track a bunch of simple synths and put it all together. Okay, this synth right here. Now, this is the Hugo bass synth from the Roland JV1080, and a lot of people use Hugo bass for synth. They use it for bass, but a lot of the gospel cats use it for their synth stabs and synth, a lot of their synth work. And I figure it would fit in this song because of the type of song that it is. So I just panned it to the left, did the same thing, EQ and compression. The patch did the rest of the work. Okay, so now for this, it's called So Legit. Now, this patch is made in Omnisphere. This is probably one of the most powerful plugins you will ever buy. If you can't get any plugin at all ever, and you're like, oh, I could only have one, this would be the one to get. Now, there's this joint called Grungy Boy that I did, and that doesn't come in until later on in the song, and it sounds like this. Okay, and for that I used, I want to say it's Omnisphere again. Yes, Omnisphere again. One stop shop, guys. Grungy Boy. All I did was pull it up and play it. That's all I did. I didn't do nothing else. The delay is in the plugin itself. I just did EQ and compression, but the delay you hear is coming from the plugin.